Hello everyone, welcome to a new chess video. In this video, I'm going to teach you the Trompowsky attack, an attack that will let you win the game in just a few moves. And pay attention, because you'll be able to pull it off in just 2 moves. That's right, just 2 moves. When you play d4 and your opponent responds with knight to f6, which is the most common reply, and don't worry, if they play d5, you'll still be able to use this attack. The Trompowsky attack starts with this wonderful move right here. This is going to be an incredible recipe that will give your opponents a constant headache. Let's enjoy learning this powerful attack together because honestly, I'm absolutely sure it's going to blow your mind. Take a look at this. First, we need to consider a very interesting move when we play the Trompowsky attack, targeting the knight. Black doesn't want to double their pawns, and there's a move, which is the first one we're going to analyze, knight to e5, which is a very annoying move. Notice that it attacks our bishop and forces us to move it again. Well, you need to remember this move right here, if they attack your bishop directly, we're going to give it up with this pawn move. And notice that here black is going to be rubbing their hands together, thinking, first, I win the bishop pair, how great. Second, I double your pawns, that's why. And if we add to that the fact that this knight here is very unstable, they're going to capture in every game, alright? Once they capture this knight, you simply have to recapture, alright? It seems like nothing has happened here. We've lost the bishop pair, our pawns have been doubled, but even so, be careful because there's danger in the position. Look, a very logical move, e6. Why? Because now they can develop this bishop, and also their queen doesn't attack this pawn here, which seems so defenseless. So how would you feel if I told you that the brilliant move here isn't to defend this pawn, but to push it forward and give it away? Pay attention, because this move is much stronger than you think. Oh, by the way, I almost forgot. Did you know that if you order this chess set, you can personalize it with your name? I think that's amazing. Not only can I do it as a content creator, but all of you can also personalize your own chess set. It's perfect if you want to give a gift for Christmas or just treat yourself. Why not? Of course you can. Check this out. This pawn can be captured in 2 ways. We're basically giving it away. If they capture with the rook's pawn, they've lost the rook right away. Why? Because it's not defended. Notice that the pawns have opened up. So now we know one thing. We're giving away this pawn, but you can't give away this other pawn. You can't take it. A little trap that no one's going to fall for, right? But if someone does, well, we take the rook. So with which pawn should they capture? Well, they're forced to capture with this pawn, because if they don't, we'll capture, and notice that we're going to take away their castling. Not only will they stop winning the pawn, but they'll also end up in a terrible position, so they have to capture. And then notice how we're going to take advantage of this very weak structure of the black pieces where, their king won't be safe at all, and we'll play d3. A move where you might say, come on, chess teacher. It's a very passive move. Since when do we play such passive moves on this channel? Well, relax. Now, our opponent can play anything. For example, they can develop this knight, this bishop. It doesn't matter to us what they do, alright? Just imagine this king here is really scary, right? It's really scary to have this king here. So they want to develop this bishop anywhere just to be able to castle and at least make use of the open file. That's the most logical thing for black to think. So come on, you and I are going to think about where this bishop could go. Could it go here? That seems like a really bad move, because after c3, they'd be losing a tempo and would have to pull it back, right? Alright, it can't go here, so this seems like a really bad move because it blocks this pawn here, right? So the most logical move, I'm sure you'll agree with me, is bishop to e7. A totally natural developing move that could even, in the future, help defend the castled king, right? So bishop to e7 is the most logical move here to be able to castle. So we keep attacking here. We bring the bishop here, and pay attention. If they get distracted here and play a move that's not castling, like for example knight to c6, we simply take this pawn with check. And they can't capture because, remember what I told you, this pawn can't move. And a lot of people, when we play bishop to d3, don't realize the real threat is bishop takes pawn, check. Notice that now, if they do this, we would take here, and they'd lose the right to castle. They'd have to move the king here, so they'd be in a terrible position. What they don't know is that even if they fall for this trick, they're going to lose. But even if they castle, they've lost anyway, because we have a spectacular move that's going to give you goosebumps. Rook takes pawn, and we win the game. A spectacular rook sacrifice. And you might say, chess teacher, but here they can take your rook and you don't have any pieces left to attack. Well, pay attention, because now it's time for our beautiful queen to come in, check. And thanks to the fact that this pawn cannot move because we have pinned it with the bishop on d3. They can't capture the queen, so they have to move the king. And now we simply bring in the bishop, bishop takes pawn, and notice that right now this king is in a checkmate situation. On the next move, we're going to bring in the queen and deliver a tremendous checkmate. There's no way to escape. Having seen this line from the beginning, now comes the most interesting part of this video. And let's see what happens if, when we play d4, they respond with d5. Pay close attention to these lines because they're absolutely spectacular. We'll start, of course, by playing our bishop here, alright? Notice one thing, I've checked the database and I'm just sharing this as a fact, okay? I'm not saying this will happen to you, but more than 500,000 players, right here, without thinking, have played e6 and left their queen hanging. So, well, look, what does this mean for you? If you ever catch one of those 500,000 people who accidentally play e6, you've won the game instantly by taking their queen, right? But that's not the interesting part. What happens if they keep playing knight to f6? In this case, the story changes, alright? If you first played the double queen's pawn, and then they placed their knight on f6, think about this. You should capture that knight, alright? And now let's look at the attack plans, because they're just incredible. As I always tell you, think carefully about the plan, don't just memorize the moves by heart. They should capture this bishop here. Obviously, it seems best to capture with the e-pawn, because notice that if they capture with the e-pawn, when they castle, alright, this king is going to be left totally exposed, right? So this bishop should logically be captured with the e-pawn, okay? Let's continue with natural moves. As our plan suggests, we're going to play e3. Take a look, okay? The small difference, right from the start of this line, is that our opponent has a much stranger pawn structure than we do, alright? It's true that we've given up the bishop pair, but that was the idea behind placing the bishop here, right? You'll see how the attack develops, because we won't need the bishop pair. Alright, for example, they might play bishop to d6. This is the best square for the dark squared bishop. Mare, because it will be aiming directly at our castled position, right? As we said here, we would just play c3 and chase it away, and it would have to go back here. We've gained a tempo, right? So if they play here, that's fine too. The attack would work exactly the same. And if they play here, well, we're gonna stick with the same plan. Notice something. Now I'm going to show you the attack plan that's going to fascinate you. You don't need to focus on the moves your opponent makes, okay? Just focus on the plan, because it doesn't matter what they do, okay? Here, we're going to play c4. Does this structure look familiar to you? It looks like the Queen's Gambit structure, right? For those of you who are a bit more professional. Well, that's the idea. So what's our idea here when we play c4? Well, if you've ever seen my video, for example, on the Cole system, I explained that when these two pawns are threatening to advance here, it's super important that when you play c4, you also play c6. Do you know why or not? Because this bishop wants to be on this diagonal, right? If we play c4 and they castle, for example, now after this move, this bishop will never be able to be on the diagonal it wants and will have to retreat. That's why it's extremely important, and burn this into your memory for when someone does it to you too, when they play here to threaten coming here. You absolutely have to play c6, and c3 if you're white, okay? But this is essential, because now if they play this move here, you can simply pull the bishop back and nothing at all has happened, because it's still here, alright? So obviously we're not going to play c5, because it doesn't accomplish anything, alright? So what are we going to play? How should we continue, chess teacher? Well, by developing our pieces. For example, we'll develop this knight over here. Knight to c3, now directly threatening to capture this pawn here, you see? Right now, if they don't respond, we'd have pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn. No matter how much they try to make this jump here, we'd be covering it with the knight, so this knight couldn't be recaptured with the queen, they'd be losing a pawn. That's why with knight to c3, we're threatening to capture the pawn. The most logical move for black, if they don't want to lose a pawn, is to capture the pawn themselves. And then we develop our bishop while we recover this pawn that was just exchanged. Notice that the good thing about this attack is that we don't sacrifice any material. We have a better position without sacrificing material. And pay attention, because you haven't seen the best part yet, okay? What can black do now? They have several moves available, but you'll agree with me that this point is starting to get a bit weak, so the most normal thing is for them to castle, right? And at least they protect this point well, they defend themselves well. Yes, that makes a lot of sense, and we'll keep developing. Notice that we should stick to our plan. We develop our pieces naturally, and now comes a move that is a mistake. Pay attention, a move as natural as pinning this knight, which I'm sure happens to you in almost every game, right? Playing this bishop to pin the knight. Here, it's already a mistake, not because of the pin itself, but because it doesn't lead to a threat, okay? We've placed our pieces very well, and it's practically impossible to save themselves now. Here, the first thing you should do is drive out this bishop. And now I ask you, my friends, what happens if they capture this knight? Should we recapture with the queen or with the pawn? Exactly, we should recapture with the pawn. Even though it might seem strange, capturing with the queen always seems much better. But in this case, capturing with the pawn would help us launch an attack along this file directly toward the king. Do you see that? The pieces are aiming at the king, we can push this pawn, and this attack would be extremely strong. So if in any of your games, when you try to chase away this bishop and they capture your knight, I recommend being aggressive and pushing this pawn. Then, when you advance this pawn, the queen can also join in. And the consequences would be drastic with the rook, the queen, and everything together, right? But it's true that here, most players don't capture this knight because it's a bit of a weak move, so to speak, right? Because they're giving up their pair of bishops for a knight that's not really doing anything at the moment, right? So the most common thing is that they pull back and keep the pin. And now I'm gonna recommend this devastating attack. Although usually, this move is very dangerous because our king hasn't castled yet. Careful, careful, we're weakening ourselves a lot here. Take a look at this. Now we can afford this massive attack simply because the king is in the center, really well protected by this pawn chain. And even more importantly, our attack is going to be super strong because we have the bishop aiming at the castle position. These pawns are going to be launched forward and this rook is going to be placed on the open file. And I'm going to show you how to continue because it's really impressive, alright? And be careful. I'm not just telling you this for the sake of it, I've tested it with the engine. No, seriously, be careful. I've played this opening many times in tournaments, alright? In official tournaments. And I know how people respond because I've studied it thoroughly. That's why I'm giving this to all of you, so that just by watching this video, you can save yourself many hours of study. Alright? Take a look at this. We're gonna keep attacking this bishop with the knight, okay? This bishop can't go anywhere. That's why they've already lost their pair of bishops. But that's not the most important thing. The key is the attack plan we have. No matter what our opponent does, whatever they do, okay? Notice that they don't have many options either. I'll develop the knight over here because I can't do it over there, right? Let's capture this bishop. Notice that here they only have one possible move, because this pawn can never recapture thanks to this powerful bishop we have on c4, the Italian bishop, as it's called, the bishop on c4. It's always targeting the weakest point of the position. So, if they can't capture with this one, they're going to have to capture with that one. And that's fine. They have a very defensive square. That's just how it is. It seems really hard to break through, but I'm going to show you how to break it very easily, okay? All we have to do now is push our pawns. Little by little, we push the h-pawn. Notice that I'm explaining it in a simple way so that everyone can understand. And if I'm going too fast, I apologize. I'm doing my best, okay? We push our two pawns. And now, how can they defend themselves? Well, notice that for now, the best thing is to do nothing, because if they push these pawns, they weaken themselves. For example, a completely natural move in this case could be to move the queen, or to attack this bishop. If they attack this bishop, what did I tell you before? We're going to keep the diagonal, so all we have to do is come here and our plan is still on track. Notice that you shouldn't memorize this move, right? Because if you just memorize the moves, you'll say, oh yeah, I have to do this. No. You just stick to the plan. Our bishop wants to be here, and if they attack it, Well, we just keep it on the diagonal we want, right? Imagine, for example, they play queen to e7, a natural move, wanting to come toward the king. They can't really do much else, can they? All they have left is to move the queen, and then we're going to launch the attack directly with h5. Notice that this attack seems really slow, but we've already won the game. What are we threatening now? We're threatening pawn takes pawn, and notice that they couldn't recapture, again thanks to this monster here that's attacking the king directly. So black has to react. If they don't react, we capture and win here. So they have to react. It would be very dangerous for them to push forward, because look at this. We break through here and we have the rook. There would be no way for them to stop it. Notice that the queen could come in through here and there would be no way to stop it. So the only solution they have left is to capture this pawn. It seems like nothing happens because the pawn was doubled. And once they capture this pawn, what should we do? Gestature. Well, it's very simple. We have a star moves. We could recapture with the rook. We could recapture with the pawn. But much more precise is queen to d3, winning the game. Why? Because look, it directly targets this square right here. And if this pawn is captured, it's checkmate. That's why this pawn can't be captured right now. And the options are starting to get, sorry I can't speak, very scarce for the black pieces. It seems like the only way to defend is this move here, and they've lost on the spot after the brilliant move. Queen takes pawn, check. Notice that this queen can never be recaptured because we have this bishop here, and we've won the game. When the king moves, simply bringing in the rook. Look, it's a brutal checkmate. I'll show you how to break open this castling thanks to the pawn advance. It's much simpler than it looks. Hey Stitcher, but what happens if, right when we play the bishop here, they try to chase it all over the board? Well, the truth is, this is a serious mistake, alright? It's a really big mistake. However, if you know it's a serious mistake, but you don't know how to punish it, they'll do it to you and you won't know how to win the game. That's why you need to know how to punish it. It's very simple, but hey, I'll show you just in case, alright? We're going to pull this bishop back, and we're going to move it here. Why don't we move it somewhere else? Because here we're tempting them to start attacking this bishop, alright? Absolutely nothing happens. Notice that we have this bishop on g3 on a very powerful diagonal, directly targeting this pretty weak point because it's only defended by the queen. And notice that what they've done is seriously weaken their kingside. And that's exactly what we're going to take advantage of to destroy, alright? Whenever this pawn moves, something bad already happens. Both the f7 pawn and the f2 pawn are candidates to not move too much, alright? But okay, how do I punish this gestature? Well, it's very simple. We could just break through here, smash the pawn structure, open up the rook, yes, all of that would be possible. However, there's a much stronger move when things open up on the king side, which is simply to play e4, alright? With ideas of attacking here, with ideas of attacking the center. No, it's very simple. That's not the idea, okay? Let's suppose here that black moves first, okay? I'll show you the idea. For example, any move like knight to c6, a totally normal move, we immediately break through with e4. Why? Like I said, it's not to attack here, but to open up this diagonal for the queen. Notice that the king here is very exposed, alright? Very, very exposed. And there's no way to cover up. There's no way to block with any piece. That's why, no matter what our opponent does, we're going to launch a really powerful attack. Honestly, here the best move they have is to capture this pawn we've just given away, alright? e4 is better than e3, yes, because that way we also put pressure here. No matter how much they capture this pawn, it's very simple. We bring in the queen to give a tremendous check to the king, who, as you can see, has to run because there's no way to block with any piece. The knight can't move like this, and the bishop is on dark squares, so when the king moves, it's really, really simple. We keep developing our pieces. For example, knight to c3. Here, it's very easy to take advantage of the king. A lot of you will say, sure, this is really easy, but I'm sure you don't actually know how to take advantage of it. Well, pay attention to this. I'll quickly show you how to make the most of it. Now, once we develop the knight, black doesn't have many options left. For example, it doesn't matter what they do, because the plan stays the same. If they capture this pawn, why is that? Because at least they say, yeah, I have a worse position, but at least I have 2 extra pawns. So we simply castle long. Just look at how satisfying it is to castle long with these pieces. We pin this knight to the king and the queen. They can't do absolutely anything. After castling long, things get tough for them. Ideas that black might try, for example, defending this knight because it can't move. You see it, right? And when they defend it, for example, we bring in this bishop to give check. Notice how our pieces coordinate. The knight can't capture because the rook is there. The king can't go here or here because of the bishop. The king can't go here because of the other bishop. So the king only has one square, which is to come over here. Notice how our pieces coordinate beautifully. We bring the knight to f3, giving it away twice over. We're giving it away both with the knight and with the pawn. You can't capture with the knight because, look, our rook is looking straight at the queen. But, chess friend, what happens if they capture with the pawn? Well, we simply open lines to bring in the other rook, and look at what a wonderful position this is. Where the black pieces can't save themselves from anything anymore. We're attacking with everything, both bishops, the queen, both rooks, and the knight, and all black has done is put their king in the center of the board. Just in case, I'll show you how to punish what you see here. The most important thing in the video, guys and girls, is that we've seen what happens if they make serious mistakes, but what if black plays the Trompowsky attack perfectly? If, after making this wonderful move here, the Trompowsky attack, they respond with e6, the best move for black without a doubt, well, pay attention. The great thing about this attack is that no matter how perfectly they play, our attack is incredibly powerful. How are we going to continue here, chess teachers, if they play e6, the best move in this position? Why is it the best move in this position? Let's understand why. Because, simply, first, you can't capture this knight because then the queen would take, and you wouldn't be able to double the pawns, right? And second, which is very important. Now I don't remember what I was going to say. I do not remember what I was going to say anymore, friends. But anyway, e6 is the best move in this position. I have so many things on my mind that they just slip away right away, okay? Pay attention to this. How should we react if black plays perfectly? The right move is e4. Notice that now we're threatening a terrible threat, e5, and winning this knight, right? Because it couldn't move since we have this very strong pin. So e4 looks like it gives away the pawn, but you can't take it for exactly the same reason. We would win the queen, right? So how can they get out of this pin? Very logical. Bishop e7, right? You're thinking the same as I am. Bishop e7 is the best move, and it is, but it's very passive. And as always, pay attention. This bishop can't come here because it would be forced back. It can't come here. It can't come here because it would lose a piece, really brutally. Because it would lose this one, it would lose this one. So the best is bishop e7, end of story. So if they're definitely going to play bishop e7, how should I continue? Well, you should keep up this tremendous pressure. Notice that they've played the most logical moves in the position. And this position already feels a bit off, right? We're putting on too much pressure. Alright, black can come here and notice something. Careful, now they're attacking this bishop. If I capture here, they'll capture with the queen, and we're not doing so well, okay? Pay attention to the right move, and I want you to remember this move, retreating the bishop to d2. It seems like the weirdest move in the world, I know. We've moved the bishop, and now we're moving it back, but it's fine because we've managed to... This is studied and theoretical. We've achieved this strong, advanced pawn center that restricts our opponent's position, and our attack is coming soon. Pay attention to something here. For black, the best option if they don't want to castle quickly, notice that here they have no defense, and this pawn is restricting the knight's best square to defend the king side, so they can first try to loosen up the position a bit against this strong center, and they should do that. c5. How should we react if they play c5 against us? Be careful, because if we capture, we actually improve this bishop, right? So we don't want to capture, but we also don't want to let them capture us, because if we let them take, first of all, we lose the pawn, and if we defend it, we've lost the support for this pawn here. So, chess teacher, this isn't looking so good to me anymore, huh? How should I continue? Well, it's very simple. Don't worry, this position is extremely good for white. It's a devastating attack. c4, an in-between move. Okay. An in-between move, we attack this knight here. Where does this knight have to go? It really doesn't matter to us. Let's suppose it comes here, but any other square, well, it only has here or here, because if it comes here, it gets into trouble, right? We attack here, we attack there, and it gets into quite a bit of trouble. So it only has here and here. It doesn't matter to us, okay? Now what we're going to do is capture this pawn. Now, yes, we want to capture this pawn before they do, and now I'll explain why. It's true that they can capture with the bishop, but now we have some really good prospects. What's happening here? Well, it's very simple. Notice that this flank isn't being defended by anyone. If we split the board in half, this is a trick for your games. You split the board in half and look at where your opponent's pieces are. All of them are here. So I'm going to attack on the other side. This move is excellent, okay? This move is incredible. Queen to g4, brutal. We're hitting this spot here, and there are no pieces to come and defend. The only thing they can do is, for example, let's see, if they play king to f8, they lose castling, right? Seems like a pretty bad move. They lose castling. We're putting a lot of pressure here. We'll develop the knights, the bishops, and this position is likely to end up losing. But anyway, no one is going to play king to f8 against you. If they play this rook over here, what can we do? Well, the situation starts to look pretty similar, right? They won't be able to castle, they're facing the threat of a pawn that doesn't seem too serious. We can bring the bishop here, which they can't capture because we take the rook, and if they push forward, we have all the dark squares under control, and it looks like they won't be able to get out of this one, right? So many of you are thinking, well, then the most logical move, without a doubt, is to protect it by castling, and that's what they're almost always going to do. It doesn't matter what they do, whether they come with the king, with the rook, or castle, you've got this one, okay? But if they castle, which is the most logical move, how can we win quickly? With the classic bishop attack. We take advantage of the fact that the queen pins the king and that this bishop can't be captured. We're threatening checkmate in just one move. How can this checkmate be defended? There's no way to defend against it. The only way to avoid checkmate is to move here with the pawn. We weaken all the dark squares, and not only that, they're giving us the rook for free. It's the only way to defend against checkmate, which is why it's so powerful. And to finish with a bang, I'm going to show you how to punish the dark squares, a real masterclass. If your opponent doesn't play here, or castle, but instead plays g6 to defend all of this, it looks like nothing's happening here. But they've gotten themselves into some serious trouble, and like I said, I'm going to give you a masterclass on how to brutally punish the dark squares. And it could all start, many of you might say, with the bishop over here, right? Attacking the queen, it makes sense. With the bishop here, trying to prevent them from castling and all that, it really makes sense, right? Because you're already thinking about how to take advantage of the dark squares. But how would you feel if I told you that here you have a spectacular move, which is knight to c3? You might say, chess teacher, now you've really lost your mind. You've got an amazing attack on the dark squares and you play knight to c3. Seriously? Yes, ladies and gentlemen, pay attention to how to blow up these dark squares. Knight to c3, trust me. My friend, trust me. Here, it doesn't matter what our opponent does. It really doesn't matter at all. Imagine they play knight to c6, attacking this pawn, which would also attack our queen. Alright, I really don't care. This knight is here to jump to e4. And just look right now at the control it has over the dark squares. This knight was the key to completely busting open the dark squares. We don't care what they do to us. For example, the best move, without a doubt, seems to be knight takes pawn. While they're attacking our queen, right? We're going to ignore this queen, right? That's all we're interested in, so what are we going to do? Notice that now we have the knight ready. Not only that, but we also have the bishop ready. And yeah, well, look, I said we're going to ignore this queen, but first we're going to move her, okay? We're not going to go completely crazy either. We're going to pull her back. But where to? Here, okay? We're going to pull her back here. And you'll see the reason for pulling her back here in a moment. It's not just about putting pressure on the knight, though that's part of it. Notice that now, first, we're attacking the knight. Second, we're attacking the bishop. Two pieces attacked at the same time. And no matter how much you try to defend both, there's only one way. Notice that here, no, because we would capture, the only way is to come here. Our idea of placing the queen here wasn't to capture the knight, but rather, the idea was much more powerful. You'll see it now. First, we come in to attack with the bishop. This move was already in the air. It had to come at some point, right? This queen is under attack, so it has to move. And now comes the master move, the reason we pulled the queen back here. Check out this move, queen to a3, and we win the game with this move, a wonderful move. What are we threatening? Very simple, we're threatening this checkmate if we get another turn here, giving the kiss of death. Did you know this one, the kiss of death? When the queen checkmates right in front of the king, directly in front, it's called the kiss of death because the queen is kissing the king, right? Spectacular. How can they defend themselves? Well, there aren't many ways, right? Maybe the only way seems to be bringing the knight here to defend the square. And now they're also defending with the bishop by moving the knight. This knight jump, but all we have to do is jump to the other side, check out this spectacular leap check, and the king can't go here or here. Why? Because we have the bishop, so the king's only move is what? King to f8, there's no other move, and here, how do we finish this off? With the brilliant move, knight to b5, it's a discovered attack with the queen, and on the next move we're going to capture this queen. Notice that the king has to move, and now, look how beautiful this is, we capture the queen with the knight, and we'll take the rook too. At some point, we'll end up delivering checkmate and driving out this knight, so this is just spectacular. Check out the TROMPOWSKY attack, huh? You didn't expect it, did you? That it would be so beautiful and so powerful, right? Well, yes, ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed this kind of video, the only way you can really support me, to thank me, since I do this completely for free, is by leaving me a like. Come on, let's see if we can break the record for likes, and of course, see you tomorrow with another spectacular chess video on this channel. See you tomorrow, guys. Goodbye.